Welcome back to the Nullified Take channel here on YouTube, where I've got the TNT takes for you on Australian Survivor Heroes vs Villains Episode 7. It's the episode that was probably hyped the most out of any episode we've seen so far this season or any season of Australian Survivor. They kept telling us that this tribal council was going to be one that we wouldn't want to miss, and it's going to be one that fans will be talking about for a very, very long time. And I'm very happy to say that they were right. This was an insane tribal council, but I am going to talk about my top 5 takeaways for this episode, and I'm going to start with number 1. Jerry goes back to the Heroes tribe. It happened very early on in the episode. We get absolutely zero confessional in regards to why he decided to go back to the Heroes tribe after he told us that he's really enjoyed the Villains tribe. He's found his spot. There's a whole scene where they talk to Shawnee and Liz, and they say, Jerry is one of us. He's part of the Spice Girls, and I feel like he had a home there with George and them, and George really wanted to work with him early in this episode. But I do think Jerry made the right decision. Just based on how this tribe is going down, it is probably the most dysfunctional tribe we've ever seen on Australian Survivor, and if they don't have a swap coming pretty soon, they're going to be dead in the water at the rate that they're going currently. So he went to the Heroes because obviously the Heroes tribe is stacked and they don't look likely to lose many tribal councils going into a merge situation. So if you look at it from that point of view, probably made the right decision there. Number 2, the Villains lose once again at the immunity challenge. So again, Jerry made that right decision because he's safe. And I've got to say, they really, really need to do the swap now. I am getting bored by seeing the Heroes just trample on the Villains every single episode because they've got just so much more physical strength in that tribe. It was a very unbalanced tribe right from the start when you look at the fact that there were 4 guys that are very super athletic, and Australian Survivor is all about physical challenges most of the time. The Villains tribe just can't keep up with that, so they really need to mix it up for that imbalance to be taken out of the game and for these villains to have a chance to go deeper in the game. I do think a swap is in the horizon. I just can't see them continuing on in the way that they have. Alright, so we get into number 3 here, pre-tribal talk, and I had a look at the timer on the episode when we went into this section of the game, and we were barely 20 minutes into the game when pre-tribal talk started. They went straight to the tribal council because tribal council itself started on the 40-minute mark, which meant that it was probably like 22 or 32 minutes of tribal council, and normally tribal council is like the least exciting part of the game because you kind of know where things are going to go, and especially if you watch Survivor US, they don't really give Jeff anything. So, you normally don't expect much from Tribal Council, but the pre-tribal talk was interesting. We knew that the Simon versus George battle was going to come to a head at some point, and we get Simon and Stevie coming up with a plan to vote out George, which isn't original or new. Simon's been wanting to do that from the beginning of the game, and now that Jerry isn't there, he feels like he's got the numbers. He's 4 with his guys going against the 3 with George and his 2 girls, the Spice Girls Alliance, and Stevie comes up with a fake conversation just to put George's mind at ease that they're not coming for him. They don't want George to know that it's coming, but Stevie knows that George is the person he needs to vote out, so he fakes a conversation with him and gives him a lot of respect and says, you're a legend in the game, and he kind of butters him up. And it is interesting how, this one conversation does stick in George's head, because when it comes down to who is he going to save, he's going to save the guy that is the most receptive to him, or someone that he believes he can mold and work with down the line. So this conversation, even though Stevie didn't know it and it was a fake conversation from his end, ended up helping him stay in the game. So well done to Stevie for that. We also, in the same time, I had a lot of people on the channel asked me, why did I not put Geordie in my top 5? And a lot of people said I should have added Geordie into my top 5 when I said these are the top 5 players to watch and who potentially could win the game. And I agreed. Geordie's done a lot of right things this season. He's done some good stuff. But I knew he was playing a dangerous game, playing the middle game against someone like George. And this whole thing is going to blow up in Geordie's face here, obviously, this episode, because he also now wants to turn against Simon, and his logic is sound. You cannot deny Simon is a walking disaster at the moment in the game, and he is going down in flames, and Geordie doesn't want to get taken down with him. He sees him being combative and talking down to people around him in camp and being bossy, and he's afraid that Simon's going to jump over to the alpha males in the other tribe if there's a swap or if they get to a merge situation. And he says, look, listen, the alphas are not going to run this game. We're not going to get to the end that way. The non-alphas outnumber us by quite a bit. So I think it was smart gameplay by him. But maybe he gave a little bit too much information away, because he ends up talking about the fact that Simon's got an idol, and he gives George some valuable ammunition that a player like George would always use when his back is against the wall. George will do anything he can to stay in this game. We saw that the first time he played. So Geordie kind of underestimated him a little bit there. I just think that the reason Geordie sort of did this is because he didn't feel like he could bounce ideas off Simon, and that Simon was an open-minded person. He just seemed to have a one-track mind in regards to what he wanted to do in the game. Number 4, a last-minute twist saves Simon in the game because George had the girls ready to turn on him. He also had Geordie talking to Fraser, and he said, you're close to Fraser, let's make this vote happen. And Fraser was on board, so he got 2 of the boys turning on Simon here in this position. And we never really got a confessional from Fraser here to understand, and I think we barely had any confessionals from him this whole season, but we never understood why he was turning on Simon as well. Like, did he feel the same way, that Simon was being a bit too bossy? But having an individual immunity challenge at Tribal Council, I thought was genius. And they end up doing this. Simon beasts it out. He wins his first individual immunity, and Survivor becomes very emotional because of that, and sort of noticed that there was potentially going to be some votes coming his way. So what a twist, because now suddenly they've got to come up with a plan B, and George walks around and tells the boys, let's vote Stevie, let's go to plan B, and he tells the girls that as well. But when they get back to Tribal Council, they kind of split into their corners, with the boys being on one side, and then with George and the Spice Girls being on the other side of Tribal Council. And I think George knows they could very easily have those 4 boys vote together. They could split vote. But this causes George to think about what is the actual plan, and he tells both the Spice Girls he's got an idol, he's going to play it, and he's going to divide and conquer and drive a wedge between the boys. So we go into number 5, and I just want to say, there are levels to this game. There are levels to these games. Like, there's a reason that some players will go deep every single time they play this game, and other players won't. I once said that I believe George is the best strategist to never win the game. And I think tonight proved it. I think without a doubt, he proved why he is the best strategist in this game that have never won. It was an absolute masterclass. You had Simon, the person who never really made it to the merge, never really achieved anything in the game of Survivor, going very, very hard after George's legacy in this game. And he was trying to humiliate George, talking about him quitting, talking about him being second, not winning, does his winning not matter? And it did not look good on you, Simon. It did not look good. You know, I can't speak for Simon, and clearly he has been scarred from his first season playing Survivor. It kind of brings me back to Tyson Apostle on Survivor Winners at War, where he said that some people, they just never recover from the game after a loss, and other people can live on. And I feel like Simon is the first. You know, he's the person who just, he's got that chip on his shoulder that he couldn't make it. He's got a high expectation and a bar that he sets for himself in anything he does in life, and he didn't quite achieve it, and he is a fan of the show. So, and going after George is just not smart. I mean, he needs to know that George has got a lot of fans out there. Yes, there's some people who know that George can be a bit, you know, comes across as a bit full of himself sometimes when he's like, I'm the king and all this kind of stuff, but he's got the legacy to back it up. He's got that legacy, and it's also part of a show. You know, Geordie said it best, in my opinion, when he said to Simon, this thing's getting very personal, and that the fun out of this rivalry was gone for me by this episode. I've been enjoying the whole Simon's coming after George, you know, throwing the hat in the fire and all this kind of stuff, but tonight I realized it was at a different level, and it became a bit uncomfortable to watch. But George coming up knowing, you know, that Simon's coming after him, and teaching Simon here about playing the game. You know, he lets the votes start rolling in. Stevie goes up to be the last person voting, and then he just gets the idol out and he says, hey, it's green, it matches the color of my shirt this season. And then he starts putting that pressure on Simon and saying, hey, Now let us know if you're the hero or the villain. Will you save the one person who was loyal to you, the one person that's voted with you? You think you can trust the people over here, but you don't have them. And he throws Geordie under the bus, saying, I know about your idol. You need to play that idol if you want to have friends in this game. You can start over. It was such a high-level conversation, and Simon was so backed into a corner. But Simon felt like, listen, I need to keep the idol that he thinks is an idol just so I have another 3 days or 2 days in the game. I can't save it on Stevie because I'll go next. And he did the right thing. He probably shouldn't have played it, but he got outplayed bad in this position by George. I mean, George basically forcing him to show his cards that he isn't loyal to Stevie to the core. And Stevie realizing that Simon is not his friend in this game. He's now detached himself from Simon and then driving the wedge between Geordie and Simon and voting out the person that's probably like the least complicit in the crime that they wanted to commit against Simon and Fraser. Because maybe Simon could have worked with Fraser. Maybe Fraser could have been the glue between a Simon and a Stevie. But Geordie and Simon now has got no trust in each other, don't want to work together, and Stevie doesn't want to work with them. It is absolutely brilliant. I think that this tribal council will be talked about for many, many years, and we would look at the strategy and dissect this gameplay for many, many years. I can't wait to get on the podcast and do a deep dive with the boys to talk about the strategy of this going in when I've had some time to really let it sink in and think about it, because I've just watched the episode. Hands down, this is why George is a legend in the game. I agree with him. No matter where he goes this season, his legacy will be untouched in my mind. He is a legend of the game, playing amongst mere mortals at this stage. But I don't think George is going anywhere anytime soon. This villain's tribe is in a position where they're losing numbers and they're in trouble. But I see a swap coming. I see him getting in with Haley. The edit has shown us that him and Haley have been talking strategy quite a bit. And I do think Jerry will form a part of that alliance again. I think he's going to find his numbers somewhere down the line. And I'm bold, man. I'm predicting George going all the way again. And if he plays this type of game, and there's more moves like this to come, he's going to be winning in a very dominant fashion. I do think the Spice Girls are in it as well, Liz and Shawnee, potentially to win. But clearly they were just hanging on his mind and letting him do the strategizing and the thinking for this specific vote. But sometimes, you need an absolute gun, an absolute weapon in your alliance to be able to get you to the end. They just need to get one over him towards the end game for them to be able to win the game. So I'm not willing to count those two ladies out, and that's why they're in my top 5 as well. But what an exciting episode. What did you guys think about this episode? Leave your thoughts and comments in the section below. Put a like on this video, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll be back tomorrow night when we talk about my top 5 takeaways for episode 8. It is going to be a hard one to follow. This was a great episode. Talk to you guys later. Bye.